from the CBS Bay Area studios, this is KPIX 5 News.
We are following developing news. A magnitude 4.4 earthquake shook the Bay Area overnight. I'm Michelle Griego.
Good morning. I'm Kenny Choi. It is Thursday, January 4th. We have live team coverage. The earthquake struck around 2:30 this morning, centering just a couple miles southeast of Berkeley near the Claremont Hotel. And that's where we find Ann Makovic this morning with the very latest near that Oakland-Berkeley border. Ann.
Yeah, a moderate quake, not very strong, 4.4, but enough to scare a lot of people. The good news, not big enough to really do any damage. The epicenter is right at the Claremont Hotel. A lot of people know that in Berkeley. I'm about a half a mile away from there at a shopping center where this morning's earthquake is certainly the talk of the town. Everybody has a story. Most people jolted out of bed this morning, as I was in San Francisco, feeling like the building was shaking. Well, we talked with one man who's a nurse. He was working in the ICU at a nearby Kaiser Hospital. Here's his story.
The patients that were on ventilators and intubated woke up because it was such a big jolt from the earthquake. So, you know, being in California, you like to think you're used to it, but when it hits, it's still scary.
Yeah, he said he could see a lot of the patients' blood pressures physically going up at that moment. Now you're taking a look live at a Cole coffee shop. They opened a couple of hours ago, and we saw the workers coming in this morning, checking for damage, looking at the walls, looking at the ceiling, but not even had anything been knocked over. So very good news there. There's a Safeway store here behind me as well. They reported a few boxes falling off the shelves, but nothing serious. The main thing for a lot of us was just the scary jolt from your bed this morning. We spoke with one man who lives around here who was wondering the question a lot of us were at that point.
I just felt the house shaking, could hear it shaking a little bit, and within the first second you're wondering, is this the big one? But it was, I would say, around 3 seconds is all, but it was a pretty good little jolt.
And it was felt for many miles away, as far south as Santa Cruz, and just really all around the Bay Area. So if you haven't checked social media yet, you're going to find a lot of posts on that on Twitter and Facebook. But again, we're happy to report no reports of damage or injuries. Live on the Oakland-Berkeley border, Ann Makovic, KPIX 5.
That's one of the first things people do in an earthquake is check social media.
These days, yeah.
All right,
definitely.
Ann. Thanks so much.
KPIX 5's Jessica Flores is live at USGS in Menlo Park this morning. Jessica, what are officials telling you about the quake that struck?
So, Keith, just give us a couple.
Hey, good morning, Kenny. Well, right behind me is Keith Knutson. He's the deputy director here at USGS. He's going to give a breakdown about what happened. We do know that it was initially reported as 4.7 earthquake, downgraded to now a 4.4, centered in Berkeley, about 7 to 8 miles deep, felt throughout the Bay Area, all the way to Concord, San Jose. I felt it in Oakland. It jolted me out of bed. It felt like a big rig was going underneath my home. And now we'll turn now to Keith Knutson, who's going to go ahead and talk to us about this earthquake.
Good morning, everyone. It's been an early morning. I hope you all didn't get up to shaking like I did. This morning at about 2:30, there was a magnitude 4.4 earthquake just south of the University of California, Berkeley, on the Hayward Fault, most likely. Probably hundreds of thousands of residents of the Bay Area felt it. It was about 8 kilometers deep, 8 miles deep, 12 kilometers deep, and the Hayward Fault, it's not unusual to host earthquakes like this. In fact, there have been about 3 or 4 earthquakes of this size in the past 10 years in this area. So this is an area that commonly produces these earthquakes about this magnitude on the Hayward Fault. And this is a reminder that we live in earthquake country. It sounds like not much damage has been done. That's great. But it's a wake-up call, literally and figuratively, for all of us, and reminds us to be prepared.
What about the possibility that this is a foreshock? What are the odds of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So looking historically at all the earthquakes that have happened in California, about 5% of the time earthquakes are followed by larger earthquakes. So there's a low probability, but there is some probability that this is a foreshock to a bigger event. And honestly, that it wouldn't be a big surprise if we had a big earthquake on the Hayward Fault. The last big earthquake occurred in 1868. We're about at the 150-year anniversary for the last big earthquake of the Hayward Fault. And so we know from geologic excavations that big earthquakes on this fault happen about every 150 years. So people like me, geologists and seismologists, think that a large earthquake on the Hayward Fault is probably the most likely earthquake to occur in the Bay Area in the near future.
Can you speak of the depth of the earthquake, because it was widespread and a lot of people felt it?
Yeah, this earthquake, right now we think it had occurred at about 8 miles or 12 or 13 kilometers deep, which is relatively deep for earthquakes on the Hayward Fault. The fact that it was so deep means that it was felt over a wide area. Shallower earthquakes are felt over smaller areas. Deeper earthquakes, the earthquake energy radiates to a much broader region. So a little bit unusual that it was deep, and the aftershocks that are starting to occur will illuminate or highlight what part of the fault actually ruptured during this earthquake. And the first aftershock we've seen also has been deep. So it's interesting. It contributes to the widely felt nature of the earthquake. Other than that, not a lot to say about the depth.
Can you tell us more about that aftershock?
Not a whole lot. All I know is there's been one aftershock in the area since, and that's shown on this map here. I imagine in the coming days we'll see more. Hopefully not large ones, damaging earthquakes, but the smaller earthquakes, they help us as scientists understand what happened in that main shock, the magnitude 4.4 event.
It's interesting, a lot of people said that this felt bigger than a 4.7, and they were saying that, you know, it was comparable maybe to the Napa quake, maybe just shorter. Why would they have that type of feeling, and is it just inexperience with earthquakes?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. So I live in Albany. I was I woke up to this earthquake, and I have a little bit of history. I've lived in the Bay Area for almost 25 years. The things that I think about: how long did the shaking go on? What's the duration of shaking? How intense was it? And then you have to think about the types of materials you're on, the soils you're on. The soft soils around the bay margin tend to amplify shaking. But our early indications are the shaking might actually have been a little bit low for an earthquake of this magnitude. So I don't think those, if people are telling you that they felt it was intense shaking given the magnitude, I don't know that they're right, but it's a little bit early to make conclusions about that.
And we have this photographer right here actually felt it in Santa Cruz.
Wow.
Which seems remarkable considering that it was the Hayward Fault there and reaching all the way into Santa Cruz.
Yeah, so it's been about an hour since I checked our Did You Feel It page, but an hour after the event, which happened in the middle of the night, there were tens of thousands of people who had already contacted our Did You Feel It page. And I encourage everyone to go in and do that. That information really helps us understand the distribution of shaking around the Bay Area. The shaking was widespread. That's not unexpected for an earthquake of this magnitude.
Can you tell us, are we ready for something bigger than this?
Well, let me turn that around. Are you ready? I would say we're doing better than we used to do. There's still lots to be done. And the one piece of advice I offer people is to think about the buildings in which you spend time. The schools your children go to, your office, your home, are those buildings going to withstand strong shaking? And for most people, the answer is, I don't know. So then I suggest you consult an expert.